Welcome to this webinar on Malaysia's role in semiconductor, rare earth, and data center value chain at a time of great power competition. I'm Ariel of Malaysia Program at RSIS. While Malaysia is growing these three tech sectors, it is also being implicated in US-China rivalry and the securitization of global economic production and trade. Those of us who study Malaysia's domestic and foreign policies or US-China relations, therefore need a better handle on these issues that is grounded in the Malaysian reality and perspective. Each sector really deserves its own seminar, but we also think there is value in providing this introduction and bringing them together given their shared challenges and opportunities. It is an evolving issue, so we are unlikely to get a clearer picture of the trajectory today. In fact, the Straits Times has a good article today on China proposing an MOU with Malaysia on trade and investment, apparently in response to the recent US-Malaysia trade deal and critical minerals MOU. We hope to develop this project further next year with more research and workshops with partners like the speakers today. You would have seen the speaker bios, so I would just mention that we have 4 experts and insiders. Mr. Lim Wei Hang, ED and COO of Southern Alliance Mining. Mr. Andrew Chan, ED of Malaysia Semiconductor Industry Association. Dr. Ong Kian Ming, former MP and Adjunct Professor at Taylor's University. Mr. Kassim, Analyst at IDSS Malaysia. Together, they will take us through the 3 sectors within the national and geopolitical context. Given its esoteric and topical nature, we are lucky to have 2 speakers on rare earth to bookend the discussion today. After their presentations, we will have brief discussion and address questions from our audience sent via the Q&A function. Please keep your questions coming. This event is recorded and may be made publicly available later. For now, Wei Hang, please.
Yeah, thank you to organizers for inviting me. It is an honor to be here alongside with such a distinguished guest, Andrew, Qarrem, and Prof. Ong. Before I begin, a small disclaimer, I'm still recovering from a rather stubborn influenza, so if you hear the occasional cough or throat clearing, please bear with me. Now, to cover the entire rare supply chain and touch base on geopolitics in just 15 minutes, it just feels like to tell the full story of Lord of the Rings within 15 minutes. But I'll still do my best to present the key industry insights in a concise way, and hopefully this will be the start of the continued deeper conversations. Before I begin, let us recap the rare earth value supply chain. It begins with the rare earth mining, and with the minerals produced by the mines, it sends to the refinery to refine into individual rare earth oxide. And these oxides are critical feedstock for metallization. Right, so these are still part of the midstream. And through metalizations, we obtain individual rare earth metal, which either can be consumed directly by the downstream or to supply to alloy manufacturer, particularly for producing high performance magnets. So this part is the downstream, and this part to us, I will take it as a midstream for the purpose of this discussion. So generally, different countries will structure their rare earth industry according to their strength. For China, for example, it is the only true vertical supply chain country which has its own mining, refining, metal alloying, supermagnet and components, which are built over a period of 40 years with coordinated policy, capital, land, labor, and demand. And the second policies that we typically see will be the upstream and refining, right? It's just like in the US, which they are just started their refining. And this, they are trying to produce metal and magnets, but which is still very much limited. And the third business model, as you can see here, is typical to the Japan and the Europe side, whereby they are focusing limited to the midstream, but they have a vibrant and strong downstream, and they rely heavily on the imported concentrate or outside feedstocks. So the question for Malaysia is, which model are we trying to replicate, and what is realistic given our time, capital, talent base, land constraint, and regulatory capacity. We must avoid designing policy based on a hypothetical Malaysia. We must design policy based on what do we actually have today. And the factors, conditions required for sustainable business model are not static. They shift depending on what stage of capability we are in now. What matters is knowing what must be achieved at each step and moving with discipline. So, what do we mean by a sustainable business model? From my perspective, is sustainability means meeting 5 conditions. The first, resource sustainability. We must know what we have through proper exploration and internationally recognized reporting standard. More importantly, it must be economically mineable and responsibly mineable. Second, financial sustainability. Access to funding must match the scale and time horizon of rare earth development. Upstream investment is frequently neglected, even though it determines whether the rest of the value chain can exist at all. Third, operation sustainability. Policies must reflect real-world risks, geology, chemistry, geopolitics, technology, and supply chain volatility. Fourth, which is also the most important one, is environmental sustainability. Social license and environmental rigor are non-negotiable in this aspect. And finally, policy sustainability. Stable, credible, sequence policy that reflect our national interests must be in place, because the policy is the one that going to determine whether or not it is conducive for the industry to excel and develop. So when it comes to the upstream, exploration and mining, Malaysia has geological advantage, particularly ionic clay rare earth deposit, which contain higher mixed and heavy rare earth elements compared to mineral-based rare earth like Mount Well and Mount Pass. But no mine can develop without one thing: reliable resources and reserve reporting. So a few conditions must be met. First thing is mandatory international reporting, which must be according to the international standards such as job standard or NI 43101. This will build the investor confidence. Without this, mainstream investor cannot commit feedstock contract, and no one's going to commit millions, hundreds of millions or billions investment in the midstream. Secondly, security of tenure and transparent permitting. These are equally important because without a secure tenure, no miner going to invest in the exploration will take time and as well as huge investment. In this aspect, the initiative by the EITI or Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative are equally important, in which we can actually look at that. And the third one is, which is a bit controversial to many, but to me is also important: open export policy in early stage productions to allow monetizations of discovery before full-scale mining. Not to forget, exploration takes time, right? Exploration doesn't mean that it's feasible to mine. It will result in us to determine whether or not the result from there is feasible, and it will go to the permitting. It will go to pilot project. It will go to construction. All these things will take 5 to 7 years if you are successful. If you are not, it may take another 10 years. So we will have to make sure that the timings are correct. Fourth, responsible environment management. This is the most important part because we have to maintain the public trust and regulatory compliance. Without the trust, there is no mining. Without the mining, there is no feedstock to the midstream. So this is one of the most important aspects when it comes to the upstream exploration and mining. These are the strengths, not winners, but they influence the timeline. The next part is, let's go to the midstream and refining. First thing first is we still have to look at the feedstock security. For the purpose of this discussion, I would like to refer to the business model for rare earth developed for the Ministry of Natural Resources, Environment and Sustainability, or NRES. Based on that business model, we are looking at a requirement of rare earth oxide per annum of 30,000 tons. So this is a very huge task, right? Because for 3,000 tons, it means to say that we will have around 12 to 15 numbers of the current mine scales. So it is something, a very big challenge for that. And of course, for that purpose is we still need to have a long-term offtake certainty, because without that, there is no midstreams that are able to really excel or develop in Malaysia. After talking about refining, the refinery still need to sell the product for metallizing. So again, this is another factors that we will have to look into it, because you are depending on the customer and the market. The next part is financial sustainability. Refining is a 20 to 30 years investment. It is a huge investment and a lot of fundings are required. For example, let's take a look at Linus. Linus is supported by JobMac. MP Material is supported by US funding. Iluka by the Australian government. So Malaysia must ask itself is, do we expect our own private capital to finance the refining, or are we expecting a foreign investment, or the government is going to play a role? Because this is something very important. Refining going to cost us hundreds of millions or even billion. The third element of that is the operational sustainability. Malaysia, as we know, we are not a vertical supply chains country. We depend on a lot of imported reagents and solvent. In this aspect, geopolitical risk management is crucial, because if there's any disruptions to that supply chain, again, your midstream will be in a very difficult position to perform, and it will going to affect its supplies to the downstream. The fourth element, environmental sustainability. The typical issue will be waste management, emissions control, and chemical traceability. So these are very common to the midstream, and this is something, a very important aspect that we have to manage, and it will be one of the conditions that we have to make sure that the compliance to ensure the successability of the midstream. The final part of it is industrial logic, right? Before we're talking about magnet, we must ask who produced the metal, right? Because we can't just have a Linus plant without metallizing. We just can't have alloying without the we can't have metal to be alloyed if we don't have the alloy. So it's very important for us to make sure that these are the full set of the midstream that are available before we are able to support the supermagnet. So Linus in Malaysia and MP Material in the US demonstrate that vertical integration feedstock is very important. Then when we have the feedstock, we have the abilities to refine, and then we will have to look at is the metallizing and alloying before we are able to support the downstream. For the downstream products such as magnet, EV components, wind turbine, robotics, these have the highest economic uplift factors, right? For the upstream, midstream, in fact, they are not. Their uplift factors is around 1 to 1.5. But when it comes to the downstream, the uplift factor could be as high as more than 40 to 50. So because of the high value in the downstream, many countries are pushing very aggressively to relocate or retain downstream industry. So the competitions from downstreams to invest in a particular country is going to be very high. Tax incentive alone are not enough. They rely on demand pool, strong market forces, and heavy financial support. So in this aspect, Malaysia will have to ask, do we want to build our own downstream industry, or do we only want foreign investment for the downstream? If we are serious about the local capability, we must accelerate R&D, talent development, grant frameworks, and industry pilots. This will follow with industrial clustering supporting ecosystem of supply engineers and industrial process. With that, we will have to look at is the market integration. Market integrations will be means the production of magnets, motors, EV components, electronics, wind turbine, everything, which have the higher economic uplift factor that will promote the stay and relocations of the overseas industry to their home countries. So when we have that together in a particular cluster, then it will help to bring all this industry either to our own country or they will still stay back in their own home country. So this cannot be done alone. Again, through the tax incentive, because we are aware that through the OECD's tax framework, the minimum tax rate is the 15%. So tax no longer will be the main tax incentive, but if we look at the other countries, typically they will offer the financial assistance, which we will have to ask ourselves again, do we want to do that? So in this aspect, policy predictability is very important. Stable regulation is very important too for everyone to be aware that these are something the country is offering. Let's go to the geopolitics and Malaysia positions between the US and China. The reality of the rare supply demand is not just that straightforward as the supply chain logic I've outlined. Geopolitics can override economics. Malaysia, in this case, is in a unique position. We host Lynas, world's largest non-China refinery. We also have a Malaysian company deploying Chinese in situ leaching technology, previously restricted for overseas use. Scientific study before the first ecosystem mining is allowed also has been implemented by Malaysia. So in this case, we can see that Malaysia has in fact imposing higher ESG standards versus the other ASEAN country like Vietnam or Laos. So these are very important, make us so unique, and this will enable Malaysia to benefit from. First thing is accessibility to the international market. With the technology from the Chinese, for example, when it comes to the rare earth mining, and if the claims that the Chinese is agreeable to set up plant in Malaysia through a JV with a GLC, that is going to be another milestone, and perhaps that could be a compromise between the US and China, whereby Malaysia will be able to refine, produce rare earth oxide from Malaysia by using Chinese technology as part of the compromise between the US and China in respect of the supply of the critical mineral supply chain. And this aspect, it actually serves well when it comes to the logic of the recent MOU, whereby the US demanded that Malaysia should not restrict the export of the rare earth to the US and to China. When they are now willing to enter into MOU with Malaysia after the US, that could be like a positive sign whereby Malaysia in this aspect can play a very important role when it comes to de-escalate the supply chain issue or the conflict between the West and the East when it comes to the rare earth supply. But at the same time, Malaysia in this aspect must navigate this pressure without undermining our autonomy, our long-term industrial planning, as well as our commercial neutrality. These are very important for Malaysia to survive between the fight between the US and China. So how each power supports Malaysia's economic interests? A sustainable rare earth strategy can contribute to Malaysia's national interests in four ways. Firstly, through economic diversification, a pathway beyond our traditional commodities toward advanced materials and high-value manufacturing. Second, strategic relevance. Reliable rare earth supply enhance Malaysia's role in the regional and global supply chain. As we are always aware that one of the elements in the rare earth are crucial for the semiconductor. So they are somehow interrelated. Without the rare supply, semiconductors will be very much affected too. Third, high value job creations. With the emergence of this industry, we'll have more and more mining engineers, chemical engineers, metallurgists, geologists, material scientists, so on and so forth, that will come and help to build the Malaysia economy. Fourth, industrial upgrading. Stepping stone is the stepping stones to EV components, high performance magnets, so on and so forth, to develop and to have a foot in Malaysia, which is very important for the next economic growth. So, conclusion, Malaysia REF opportunity is real, but only if we approach it with realism. We don't need to choose between upstream and downstream. We need to have a responsible upstream that establishes credibility, a credible midstream that built through partnership and targeted downstream collaborations focus on what we are uniquely positioned to contribute. Malaysia cannot compete with China in scale, but we can compete in specialization, credibility, and stability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, RSIS, for inviting me. It's always good to share what's happening in Malaysia, what's happening in semiconductor in Malaysia. We'll just take hopefully 10 minutes to just share some insights. As was said by the previous speaker, we can't go through the industry and everything in just 10 minutes, but just give you a few insights, and then I'll welcome questions later. Just a bit about the industry association for which I run. The industry association is only 4.5 years old, but the industry semiconductor, or what we call the electronics industry in Malaysia, is more than 50 years in existence. Started in 1972 in Penang, and since then we've built quite a sizable and significant semiconductor global hub in Penang and in Malaysia. Currently, the association, after 4.5 years of existence, we have more than 300 members. Half of our members are multinationals from 23 countries, and the other half are Malaysian-owned. Half of our members, as I said, are from the northern state of Penang and Kedah, where we have the semiconductor hub in Malaysia. This is the map that we publish every year, and you can see over here, these are all the companies that are based, our members that are based in Penang. But we have members on the east coast, on the west coast of Peninsular Malaysia. We have 1 or 2 members in Sarawak, but most of them are on the western side of Peninsular Malaysia, all the way from Penang, all the way to Johor. Just a bit about the industry. In 2020, around 2020, McKinsey famously projected that the industry is going to double. Having taken 50, 60 years from 1960s to reach $500 million of revenue, it is projected to double in just 10 years. And at that time, we were talking about IoT, 6G, EV. But today, what is powering the industry is AI. And if you think about it, the facilities that we built over the past 60 years was built, so to speak, to produce 500 to 600 billion worth of semiconductor components. And if the industry is going to double to 1 trillion to 1.2 trillion, we are also going to probably not need not another ecosystem, but definitely maybe 50% ecosystem. And that is why you can see a lot of countries are looking at semiconductor sovereignty semiconductor self-sufficiency and say that with this doubling of the industry and new facilities and factories that would need to produce this doubling of the industry, they should also have some of the semiconductor ecosystem in their respective countries. As a result of what's happening between US and China, there is a technology war. There is a realization by many countries that semiconductor is the new oil. But oil is something that you inherently have with you in your land. Whereas semiconductor, it can be manufactured. And so many countries are saying, look, we want a piece of semiconductor. How do we do it? So from a single global supply chain that has been built up over the past 60 years, now it is no more just pure business consideration. It is almost geoeconomics, geopolitics, and semiconductor is caught right in the middle of this geopolitical considerations. I will have a slide on Malaysia now, and then I also have a slide. I'm not sure whether I have a slide on in ASEAN, but Malaysia, we are the sixth biggest exporter of integrated circuits, semiconductors, 85 billion. The US exports the most semiconductor from us. So we're quite a major player in that sense. Around 77% of the semiconductor trade, these are import exports, flows through Malaysia, having built up over 50 plus years. And in terms of strength, our strength is in the assembly test packaging. We have a 13%, but a distant third after China and Taiwan. Yeah, but still, nevertheless, with 13%, we are third. It contributes 6% to the GDP. 40% of Malaysia's export comes from electronics, for which semiconductor is a component of E&E. And it's so significant that the E&E is bigger than the next 9 biggest export combined. Yeah, it is, and it's worth around in ringgit 601 billion ringgit in 2024. Based on the monthly export numbers for E&E, it looks like it's going to be another record year. We have a few more months, maybe 1 or 2 more months. We'll see whether we'll break that 601 billion record for E&E exports. So workforce, we have around 600,000. And it's quite an important contributor to talented workforce in Malaysia by the semiconductor industry. Just to touch on maybe on ASEAN. ASEAN, 25% of semiconductor is exported out of ASEAN, principally from Malaysia and Singapore. But unfortunately, even though we export in ASEAN 25%, I'll just share two insight or points, which is the value add or from semiconductor at an ASEAN level is relatively low. I don't have the exact number, but it's, even though we export 25%, the value add is probably around 5, low single digit. And that's because in ASEAN, a lot of the semiconductor is through foreign direct investment, multinationals who come to build their factories in ASEAN. Similarly, in Malaysia, the majority of the exports, the majority of the value add is by the multinationals. If we have more local companies, which I'll touch on later in the National Semiconductor Strategy, if we have more local companies and they can become regional and global players, then I'm sure the value add of the industry in the respective countries will be higher. But unfortunately, Malaysia, Singapore, as opposed to Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, where they promote their own local companies from the very start, Malaysia and Singapore and some of the Southeast Asian countries, we are primarily in the past 40 years, FDI, we attract foreign companies to set up factories in Malaysia. So the value add is relatively low in that sense. This chart basically says that Malaysia actually, if you look at the statistics, is quite a sweet spot for semiconductor. Kearney, which is a consultant, I think this year did two study, which I from a Malaysia perspective, it's very informative. One, it says that from the front end, we are the fifth biggest, most attractive country for front end. And Kearney also in a separate report says that for back end, we are the number two most attractive country for back end. And you can see in the numbers here, in the past 4 years, from 2021 to 2024, we attracted 319 billion worth of investments. These are both foreign direct investments as well as domestic investments, about 72 billion US dollars. And these investments that we have gotten in the past 4 years is more than the combined investments that we've gotten in the past 41 years. That's incredible. And why is that? One, of course, the ecosystem is here. I'll show in the next slide that we have a fairly complete ecosystem. We've got the talented workforce who knows how to operate companies, who knows how to do Japanese, Korean, US, European, even Chinese way of doing things. We've got multilingual workforce, and they come to Malaysia also because of the doubling of the industry, as I mentioned. All countries which have got semiconductor ecosystem will also see expansion plans to meet the doubling of the industry. AI, IoT, 6G, etc. The US China technology chip war has also, and the COVID has also meant that companies are reducing or are reducing or not increasing their investments in China. And Chinese companies as well as multinationals which are looking at increasing their footprint either in China or elsewhere are increasingly looking at Malaysia because we are seen as neutral, non-aligned. We are friendly to China, we are friendly to US, and with the attractiveness from a ease of doing business as well as the cost of doing business, we are in a sweet spot, I would say, and you can see it from the numbers here. After this is by no means the complete. You can see even from my members we have more than that, but this is just to show you that we have a fairly complete ecosystem. There are obviously gaps, but we continue to want to increase the depth, the breadth, as well as to strengthen in certain areas, particularly in the assembly, test, and packaging, where we have got foreign and local companies participating. I mentioned this before, that for many years, countries did not have a specific industrial policy for semiconductor, with the exception of China, which started maybe 15, 20 years ago with Made in China 2025. But since then, you can see that the US and Europe have their own respective CHIPS Act. Japan, South Korea also have committed huge sums of monies to make sure that they continue to build on their respective strength in semiconductor. Even India, which traditionally you associate with being a software and shared services center, now feels that they also have a role to play and also have made semiconductor a strategic sector for India. And Malaysia, I will share here, also developed its own national semiconductor strategy. It's first having previously only have very generic manufacturing policies under the new industrial policy and other plans. But in 2024, the government announced the National Semiconductor Strategy, and whilst you see a lot of details here, the main focus is actually to develop and promote local Malaysian companies to become regional and national champions. On this, on the right hand side, this second point, to create and to develop and to nurture 10 very big companies and 100 not as big as the 10, but another tier. And so that's the first point. Second point is that we want to focus, as I mentioned, we are traditionally strong in the assembly, test, and packaging. We want to move up the value chain. This is quite a commonly used item, phrase, but the aspiration here is that we don't want to stay still. We want to move forward, and we want to move up the value chain, and we want to move up and do more IC design. We want to attract fabs into Malaysia. We want to get our Malaysian assembly test packaging companies to move from traditional packaging to more advanced packaging. And lastly, we want to develop our own semiconductor equipment companies. But I would say here is that the industry after 60 years has become so specialized that even though we are in the same value chain, and it might be easy to move from traditional packaging to advanced packaging, but to move from manufacturing to do IC design is actually a completely different industry. IC design is non-factory. They also call them fabless IC design. They are more talent-based. And then, of course, we have materials, the equipment. Actually, if you look at it, it is quite different segments of the industry. It's just like you're running a restaurant. You say, I want to do the equipment that supplies my restaurant. I want to do the ingredients that supplies my restaurants with all the fruits and vegetables and the meat. You can't. So moving up the value chain, particularly in the semiconductor industry, it is not so easy. The companies that are already, it's easier to attract companies that do more higher value work to come to Malaysia. But the plan is that we want to create local companies, and own the IP, own the technology, not merely asking them to come and do manufacturing here, which is a quite different proposition. I think this is my last slide to just share that Malaysia, we are the chair for ASEAN in this year, in 2025. I would say that semiconductor has been discussed at an ASEAN level, and the association, we are also doing our part. I'll just share two main and key initiatives that have arisen out of the Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship, which is coming to an end in a few weeks' time. One is that at my association's ASEAN Semiconductor Summit, we signed an MOU with 4 other regional industry associations for more collaboration, because we feel that there is value in promoting ASEAN, in getting ASEAN to work together on semiconductor. It's not easy, but we've taken the first step. Hopefully, from an association level, we can have more traction and not be so reliant on government making the moves. But the government, particularly MITI, in this case, Malaysia, we have also made some effort to get semiconductor collaboration working in ASEAN. And to that end, there is the ASEAN framework for integrated semiconductor supply chain to work on more resilience, more collaboration, more cooperation, more talent exchange. Philippines, who is the chair for ASEAN next year, will take on more substantive work. This is only a framework. They hopefully will do the strategy and some plans. So there is things happening at ASEAN level as well as Malaysia. So with that, thank you for having me again. I hope to have some questions. I welcome more questions. I hand it back to Ariel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, Andrew. Now, can I have Dr. Ong Kian Ming, please?
Thanks so much, Ariel, and also RSIS. I'll just go straight into my 4 points because of the time constraints. And in each 4 points, I'll have 3 sub-points. The first one I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about the data center, part of this webinar, obviously, since the others have talked about semiconductors and critical minerals. The first point I want to make is with regards to a counterfactual. And what I mean by this is, what if Malaysia had taken a much more restrictive approach towards data center investments? Because the narrative now, especially the public narrative, is that data centers take up too much energy and power, and also water. And I think if Malaysia had said, look, we're going to limit the number of data center investments, I think this would have been some of the responses. Firstly, I think many people, probably including in the opposition in Malaysia, would say that, oh, the government has lost out on the opportunity to invest or to get FDI from a data center perspective to our neighbors. And I think this would have been a very strong kind of possible criticism against the Malaysian government. Second thing is, I think our own companies in Malaysia would have lost out on the opportunity to build capacity and also increase experiences in the data construction ecosystem. And this includes, for example, developing expertise in the sustainability space in terms of renewable energy and also water-saving technologies. And I'll talk more about this later. Then the third sub-point related to this counterfactual would be, I think we would have lost the opportunity for some of the big tech players, including hyperscalers, to really put a spotlight on Malaysia for non-data center related investments, including in the AI and also software deployment space. So I think this is the first point I want to make with regards to the counterfactuals. If we hadn't allowed these data center investments coming to Malaysia, especially to Johor, which is also beneficial to the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. The second point I want to make is with regards to the existing benefits of the data centers that perhaps hasn't really been accentuated enough, especially to counter the narrative that they are just here to suck power and water out of the local ecosystem. I think the first thing that I want to talk about is that the benefit is that the data center investments by hyperscalers can and also have led to other value-added collaborations with local partners. So, for example, Gamuda Engineering, which is Malaysian, Gamuda is a Malaysian public listed company, was not only awarded a contract by Google to build a data center, but importantly, the Gamuda AI Academy also partnered with a Google Cloud Premier partner to provide AI tools and also SaaS platforms to the larger tech services market. I think these kinds of strategic partnerships may not have materialized without the opportunity for Google's senior management to look at opportunities for partnerships with suitable local players such as Gamuda and Gamuda AI as part and parcel of the larger data center deployment and also investment strategy in Malaysia and the region. The second sub-point with regards to the benefits of the data centers is that it actually allows local players such as AIMS and also Telecom, and also more recently, YTL, to expand their footprint into the larger digital economy and also AI ecosystem. So it's not just about building our own data centers. YTL, for example, is using its data center investment to build their own AI capabilities, including training its own Malay-based large language model called Ilmu, and then deploying some of their AI capabilities into their digital bank called RITE or RYT. And then the third, sub point with regards to this benefit is the example of a co-location player in the region called Equinix. Of course, is a very big global player, with origins in the US. So Equinix has identified Southeast Asia as an important growth market, and I think when I look through its website, it gave a very nice example of how Singapore-based e-commerce company, Buy It Now, was able to leverage Equinix's regional and global data center capabilities to quickly roll out and, more importantly, scale up its e-commerce platform to also to current and as well as new customers. So when you have these players who are in the colo space, I think it really brings a lot of interesting value proposition to the local players in the digital economy space, right? So I think this is just three examples of the benefits, current benefits of data centers. I'm not even going to go into the future benefits of which really dependent on how fast these AI capabilities are rolled out. The third point I want to make is, okay, yes, all these data centers has good benefits. Yes, they can help the local economy with some constraints on the power and also water ecosystem. But what then are the policy alignments that are needed on the part of the government to make sure that there's more value added and also multiply effects of these data centers? And I'll give three sub-points. I think the biggest policy gap in the data center space has got to do with the deployment of the processing power and then also the growth of the services sector in the cloud and generative AI ecosystem. With regards to not just enterprise solutions, but I think for me, more importantly, is how government wants to take the lead in showing that government can also be part and parcel of this data center software deployment ecosystem. So, for example, there is no clear roadmap currently, as far as I know, and timeline for different government services to be put on the cloud and for some of these contracts to be awarded publicly and transparently. And I think having this kind of cloud-enabled policy that incorporates the usage of data centers, including the local deployment of data center processing power, it can really be helpful in the Malaysian ecosystem. So, for example, if let's say the Malaysian government says, okay, I want to put these kinds of AI-enabled government procurement ecosystems into the cloud. And I want part of this to be localized and to use local service providers together with some of the big hyperscalers. Then you'll be able to see the data center ecosystem deployment power being coordinated in a more strategic manner, using government as the lead. Second sub point is that I think the incentive structure with regards to data centers, which includes guidelines on energy and water usage, this has not really been firmed up. I know that I think MIDA and also the Ministry of Finance is working hard on this, putting probably more pressure on data center companies to make sure that they can put in good value propositions to use renewable energy as well as to decrease their water consumption. But I think the details of this policy hasn't really been announced publicly as far as I know. And then I think the last policy alignment or challenge has got to do with public communications, perhaps together with industry associations on the innovations benefits, and then also on the applications associated with the data center software or AI deployment process. So I think the government, including government agencies such as MITI, MIDA, should do more collaborations with the industry associations, such as the Malaysian Data Center Alliance, to showcase some of the value-added propositions. Okay, my fourth and final point is with regards to caveats and warnings. And I think some of this has already been touched on by other speakers. I just want to bring up maybe some new points. The first caveat and warning is that I think we're not quite sure of the potential of the enterprise solutions that can be deployed via data centers. And I think if let's say we have more examples of this on the ground, perhaps using the semiconductor ecosystem that Andrew talked about earlier, this I think would be one area of possible growth. But without this kind of very concrete examples and also projections, we may have data centers there being deployed, but without this kind of good use case that can take up the power. The second caveat and warning, which is probably the more important one, is all this talk about what happens if, let's say, the AI bubble bursts in the US, and how this may affect data center investments in the US and also in Malaysia. And I think on this point, we shouldn't overreact. The reference point I want to make is the dot-com bubble bursting in the 2000s. But then you can see many of the players, their services continue to evolve and to be used differently. And some of them have emerged to be part and parcel of the Magnificent Seven, including Google, for example. So I think the data center ecosystem will continue to be relevant, even if, let's say, the AI bubble bursts. just like how undersea internet cables are still important. And in fact, some of these have even grown in importance. Sure, I mean, some of the smaller players may go bust, some of the more speculative data center projects in Malaysia may not materialize, but these can be easily taken over. And I think the larger picture is that the AI trend will still continue to grow and evolve. And I think but the big difference between the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000s and now, the similar thing happening in the US is that we have a major player as an alternative and a competitor to the AI to the US hyperscalers, which is of course China. It is a very serious AI player. It has many big companies that can deploy AI into enterprise solutions for the manufacturing industries, and then now increasingly in the services industries as well. And I think the good thing is many of these Chinese companies will set up or have already set up shop in Southeast Asia, and will continue to demand data center power and roll out capabilities that are perhaps competing and some may be complementary to what's happening in the US. Maybe just one last point on this sub point. We need to look out for India as a possible growing AI powerhouse as well, and this would also be possibly beneficial to the data center ecosystem in Malaysia and the region. And then the third, caveat and warning would be the elephant in the room. How would geopolitics continue to impact DC or data center deployment? Whether it's in the area of chips restrictions, whether it's in the area of customer segmentation between Chinese and non-Chinese and US players. I think all this needs to be monitored very closely with regards to the DC ecosystem, and then maybe related to the semiconductor ecosystem as well. Yeah, thanks. Pass it back to you, Ariel.
Thank you, Ming. Thank you so much. Now, can we have Qarrem?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I was told that there was over 100 people in attendance, and I'll make this quick. So yes, my name is Qarrem. I'm from IDSS Malaysia, and today we'll be talking a little bit about Malaysia in the emerging global supply chain in rare earths. Now, I just want to start this off by saying that if the geopolitics of the 20th century was defined by the geopolitics of oil, this century will be defined by the geopolitics of critical resources, critical materials. Why are critical materials like rare earths so important now? It is actually more to do with the push for green energy that has increased the demand for permanent magnets that go into electronics, industrial motors, things like EVs, and many other applications of high technology which require permanent magnets that use rare earths. So let's look at what the trend has been over the past few years, that the annual capacity in gigawatts for clean energy and EVs has been on an upward trajectory, and it is projected to increase in the future. The IEA estimates that around 41% of the world's rare earth elements will be needed to meet the Paris Agreement's needs. And I just want to preface here by saying that without rare earth elements, you will not be able to meet net zero targets. It would be a pipe dream. And so, therefore, for countries like Malaysia, when you have growing geopolitical uncertainty, there is a window of opportunity for us to capitalize on. Now, when I say geopolitics, what does this mean in the global context and perspective? There is a certain there is a dominance of Chinese refineries and manufacturers in the global supply chain. So the US DOE, they actually have a chart which shows that even though China is about 60% of upstream mining, and this is from the ground. And the US also is a big player here in Mountain Pass in California. A lot of those materials are subsequently sent to China for refining processes. Elon Musk once said that it is not the mine that makes you a superpower in REE, it is the refining process. And China has already monopolized in many parts of the supply chain. And so you have a vertical integration within China that confers a lot of geo-economic leverage around the world. Where Malaysia sits, we are in the separation phase, and this is largely because of Lynas. So Lynas, they mine monazite ores from Mount Weld in Australia, and they sent them here to Malaysia, where it is then processed. Now, of course, there was, and I'll get to this a little bit later, there is a push for downstream diversification in Malaysia for onshoring a lot of these processes. I'll get to this a little bit later, but basically, a lot of these partnerships are ongoing. And you'll see on the chart to the right, where you have an increasing trend of advanced economies now implementing industrial strategies. So these would include subsidies, these would include import restrictions or supply chain restrictions, primarily targeted at who they perceive to be geo-economic rivals. This is a marked difference from the early 20th century, where you have mostly emerging economies that implement industrial policies. Now you're seeing more of them coming from advanced economies. So for Malaysia's position in the rare earth landscape, let's have a look at this. So in the upstream production, we have a single mine in Qarrem. So this is in Hulu, Perak. And it is owned by a company, a Malaysian company, in partnership with a Chinese rare earth corporation to export rare earth carbonates, lanthanide carbonates to refineries in China. Now, this is, of course, this is not allowed because, as Mr. Lim very well put, there is a ban on the export of upstream materials, rare earth materials, but they have a special exemption for a period of time to do so. This is mostly for pilot project research-based purposes. And in the oxide separation phase, it is mostly Lynas. Now, of course, right now they're expanding, and there's a little bit of there's a tangent I could go here with Lynas, but we'll probably work that in sometime in the Q&A. It'll be quite long. But for Malaysian policymakers' perspective, where we want to go is on the downstream usage. Where we want to go is in metallurgy, alloying with other materials, and then to the fabrication side, where you have catalysts for industrial applications, neodymium permanent magnets, and from there you can actually go into sound systems, hard disks, EV motors, and what have you. And the sort of economic multiple, the further downstream you go, is significantly higher than the multipliers at the upstream. Malaysia actually does have a fairly large export profile of rare earth oxides, primarily from the Lynas facility. But I just want to preface this by saying that because Lynas has a what is understood as a right of first purchase agreement with a Japanese firm. So what that means is a lot of their rare earth oxides are exported to Japan and as well as Vietnam because of facilities in Vietnam. And so what this does is that it limits, or at least it creates allocation constraints for the supply of rare earth oxide domestically in Malaysia. And this is a supply constraint that downstream manufacturers have to deal with. So on the chart to your right that you see, in 2024, we exported about 1.68 billion ringgit worth of rare earth oxides. So it should, I don't know if it'll come to a surprise to many of us listening today, but in the United States, the USGS reports that about 13% of US rare earth oxide demand actually comes from Malaysia. So what this means is that, and it has been an increasing trend over the past few years, ever since there was this push for diversification. That means Malaysia is increasingly being seen as a major player and partner in this space. Now, let's look at a little bit at Malaysia's domestic side. The chart to your left that you see, that Malaysia has an estimated 16.1 million tons of rare earth deposits. And this is valued from anywhere between 800 billion to 1 trillion ringgit. And you can see here that a lot of these deposits somewhat overlaps with many of the ecologically sensitive areas, which creates an issue because, especially in the case of ISL mining, in that ISL mining works best when it's on hill slope, because you need to follow the hydrological conditions of the soil. Because if it's done on flat land, the potential for ISL lixiviants to leach into surrounding areas it's risky. But if you have it on a hill slope, then you use gravity to collect these lixiviants, which does ion exchange with the rare earth compounds in the soil. And of course, Mr. Lim, you can correct me if ever I'm wrong on this, And of course, for Malaysia, from the policy angle, there is a little bit of there are a few issues here in that, especially the SG4 states from Terengganu, Kelantan, Kedah, and Perlis, that if you look at a lot of the, at least on the news, who is making a lot of noise about RAE mining, it's typically from many of those states, because they do not want a situation where a federal authority is telling them how to manage state resources, because ultimately state resources are within the purview of the state government. This is embedded in the federal constitution, which is why having a federal body or investment body working with a foreign company for rare earth resources is so difficult in Malaysia. So for Malaysia, we actually do have SOPs for the extraction of rare earth materials. Not all states have adopted these. Terengganu and Kedah very famously do not agree to these. But what we do know is that Perak and Negeri Sembilan have, so that they find it's so that it's easier for them to develop their own mines. Now we look at the opportunities for industrial downstreaming and magnet manufacturing. For here, as Mr. Lim correctly said, mining is only a small percentage of the actual value addition in the supply chain. And as you go down the value chain, especially in the magnets and electric motors, as well as RE recycling, net zero equipment products, these are the majority of the value chain. And so and now we come a little bit to the geopolitics of the situation. So of course, the geopolitical situation creates uncertainty, and it creates both challenges that risks Malaysia's development of the sector from number one, supply chain vulnerability. So now the potential for disruption in the input supply chain does remain a tangible risk, because for many of the lixiviants and the specialty chemicals from abroad, China has, of course, used it to their advantage. See, so Malaysia does have a very capable chemical sector. Yes, it is true. And indeed, the Linus facility does source many of their chemicals from Malaysian producers. However, many of these specialty chemicals, a lot of them have to be sourced from abroad. So this creates a bottleneck that is susceptible to geopolitical disruption. So the second point is processing and technological gaps. In Malaysia, in the upstream, there are plenty of upstream miners who are very interested in looking into this sector. However, they may not have the requisite technology to do ISL mining to uncover and extract these resources. And there is a kind of technological dependence on a single source supplier for cooperation to mine deposits, even though there is actually a ban on the export of rare earth technologies from China. So this complicates the picture a little bit. And even lixiviants. So these are chemicals that are used in the process of ISL mining. Even these also have to be imported. And there is also a risk of sanctions. So what Mr. Lim mentioned about the possibility of, there is a kind of a compromise that that Malaysian companies can use Chinese technologies to produce the rare earths, and which then goes into Western supply chains. That's one possibility out of many other possible scenarios that could happen. It is also possible that for Malaysian rare earths, using Chinese technology could be subject to controls from Beijing. This is entirely a possibility that could happen. Secondly, is that there is also a risk that US sanctions on third-party supply chains, if value-added inputs are sourced from sanctioned entities, this is entirely possible as well. So for Malaysia, because we are our foreign policy is primarily trade-oriented. So we try to work the balance between all countries, companies. We try to make ourselves as open as possible. So we try to play a balancing role. There is no indication from the government that they swing one way or another. It is purely for the benefit of developing Malaysian industry. It also creates opportunities for Malaysia in that now a strategic diversification window has opened up. According to the RAND Corporation, which looked at this very issue, the United States would take about 10 to 15 years to develop their own self-reliant supply chain. So this creates a strategic window of investment. And this is particularly timely as Malaysia and United States, they have signed an MOU on that we do not impose any bans on the export of rare earths, particularly on permanent magnets. So the government has come out to say that they are not saying that unprocessed rare earths will now be exported to the United States. This is not what the policymakers want. Instead, they want to use this to develop downstream capabilities. Secondly is the US and Australia have also signed a critical minerals partnership, which could indirectly benefit Malaysia in the long term. A little bit more about downstreaming now is that for those who don't know, Linus has signed an agreement with a South Korean permanent magnet manufacturer, JS Link, to try to link together from the rare earth oxide stage to the permanent magnet stage. Although the process of alloying as well as metallization, so that remains an open detail. But what is known is that from Linus does have an agreement now with JS Link, and this is pretty much confirmed that JS Link has already bought the land, money is already in. It's just now developing those capabilities. And for Malaysia, having a neutral as well as trade-oriented focus in uncertain times is a strategic asset for us, and we need to play to our strengths. So a little bit more, and this is just the last portion, that we have to be mindful of what are the issues and challenges when it comes to developing this sector. Number one is that there is a fragmented jurisdictional and coordination deficit between essentially the federal and the state, whereby mineral resources are largely state matters, but the regulators are from the federal government. So this creates an issue where you could have misaligned incentives, and there is a need to define what are the revenue sharing mechanisms with the state, federal, as well as the other players. And so there is also a need to monetize deposits, but at the same time, we want to maintain our environmental pledge, which is 50% forest cover at least, right? So this becomes harder and harder when you have, because at the state level, RE mining in permanent forests are considered taboo. It's not allowed under the federal level. However, at the state level, the law says that you can digazette land from protected areas to non-protected areas for exploitation from the state level. And lastly is that you have the special task force on RE development in Malaysia. So this is primarily a federal policy alignment task force, where many people have mentioned that it runs in parallel to the state authority, because at the state level, actually, you have something called the NMC, which is the National Mineral Council, who attempts to align all these policies. So there needs to be closer alignment within the federal as well as the state. And secondly, as well, is that for many of the states, as you know, Line has also signed an MOU with the state of Kelantan for the processing of Kelantan-derived carbonates. Now, the problem also is that for these MOUs, a lot of the state governments do not consult the federal government. So there and a lot of the crucial data is held in their respective bodies. And so there is no structured sort of framework of cooperation, because at the very when it comes right down to it, you have to work with the state, because the law is such that the state laws override in terms when it comes to land resources. So if there is no structured framework of cooperation, then there is a problem of a race to the bottom in cooperation with the states. So we need to also look at the full cycle integration. So currently the midstream is largely isolated and destined for exports. So there is a gap in domestic feedstock. And so we need to find ways in which we can integrate those with the downstream through magnets and so on and so forth. As well as we need to start looking at unifying our technological capabilities, in that we have a non-unified R&D ecosystem where a lot of the researchers are working in silo and they're not coordinating their research capabilities. So we need a center of excellence, essentially. And of course, the strategic supply chain, we need to look at ways how to invest time and effort and money into building our own input ecosystem for the industry. Can Malaysian producers do this? So we need to see what are the bottlenecks, how can they be incentivized to produce for this sector, so that we are less insulated from geopolitical uncertainties. Lastly, we need to look at strong environmental oversight. So there are concerns of manpower from the federal side, especially when it comes to forestry, and the lack of harmonized EIA protocols between different bodies can either cause duplication or create gaps in the licensing framework. Also, we need to start looking at aligning a lot of our ESG requirements with international benchmarks, as well as looking at how to minimize land use conflict, as well as inculcate FPIC. FPIC is free prior informed consent to local communities, because when you are looking at investors who are looking to explore or to run a project in Malaysia, especially one as sensitive as rare earths, the first thing they're going to ask is this going to incur backlash from local communities? And if so, that's going to impact their downstream as well. And with ESG reporting requirements, especially for third parties, this is a major issue that needs to be solved. Yes, I think generally these are all my points. I think this is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Qarrem. Thank you so much. May we have all the speakers on camera now? I think I will start the ball rolling on the discussion segment by asking a couple of questions to each speaker. For Wei Hang, can you tell us more about the project for a Chinese refinery in Malaysia? How significant is it? Is it the first for China? And some of the information that you may have gleaned, that would be very, very interesting for us. Secondly, for Andrew, currently there's zero tariff on semiconductors to the US. What is your sense, speaking to industry players, especially from the US and even from or China, whether or not there is actually a danger of increasing tariffs, and is that actually plausible given the heavy reliance on semiconductor chips? I mean, this is why in the first place it has been set at zero for now. And then my question for Ming. Ming, you touched a bit on the politics. What will be your suggestion on how to present the data center issue to voters, especially in Johor? Do you foresee actually a political problem? I have seen comments from local, I suppose, voters that say, oh, our water supply seem to have been affected. These data centers don't produce many jobs for us. So for local politics, what do you foresee to be the problem? And secondly, you have written to defend the US-Malaysia trade agreement. I would like to understand a bit better whether or not it was really primarily to safeguard, Malaysian export to the US, especially in the tech sector. And what is your sense about the Chinese position? I think Trade Minister Zafrul put a very positive spin on the Chinese message, but I think there are a few ways to read the Chinese response and the proposal for an MOU and what that might entail. And then for Qarrem, if you want, we would like to hear more about Linus, which you promised further discussion on. Okay, can we start with Andrew? I'm looking for, can we start with, Mr. Lim first, and then Andrew, and then Ming? Yeah.
Okay.
Wei Hang?
Okay, thank you, Ariel. So, what so far we read about or heard about this Chinese refinery plant in Malaysia are mainly from the public domain. But I think a few points that is very important for us to really take a look at is especially the October 9 MOFCON announcement, in which refinery technology now become restricted technology rather than prohibited. I think that is something unimaginable, to be honest. Or rather say that if it were to happen, it might not be so soon. So because this is a sign to me is that China is preparing to do something. Because, like, for example, back in December 2023, when they actually reclassified mining techniques to prohibit restricted, that means that it's ready to to cover the Malaysia operation. So I don't see that is a very big issue. And again, is that when it comes to the technology part, right? If we were to take a look at the Linus model, right? Because Linus, we allow Linus to be 100% owned by Linus Australia. So if the same model applies, so that there is no worry about the ownership part. And when it comes to the technology, I do things that all the companies related to the rare earth or even semiconductors or even chips, right? They will keep their own secret. So they won't share the secret with anyone. So this is not the public secret anyway. Means that they have their own secret. So I really doubt that they will have that concern. I think Malaysia government also aware that even I don't think Linus share with us so much, right? That or how they actually refine, but rather on the statistics part. So in that aspect, I will see this thing is pretty real, and I think the advantage that the Chinese having over Linus in this case is because they has been using our products. So they understand the products pretty well, and more importantly is like because of the supply chains for all the raw materials, right? And they don't really face that kind of or rather I would say they have little issues to that supply chain for their raw materials, considering that um, they are the one that produce most of them. But at the same time, is this in Malaysia, naturally, we would like to see that if the raw material can be sourced locally. And I think in that aspect, it will give a higher level of the security as to the supply, because in this aspect is we always worry about the security of the supply chain. If we don't have that, then there will be a very big problem to us. So I think readings from all this publicly available information, I would think that the possibility for them to come is quite real, and I believe that they also shifted their strategy by instead of limiting their export, why not is they're coming over us to compete for the source as well, and perhaps Malaysia side can be like a compromise to the problem that they face, means that they might allow, for example, for Malaysia's product to be sold to the US. So that actually is a bit of burden, and in a way also to compete with Linux, for example. So there are many possible ways that how they can manage the dynamic of the international relationship.
Thank you, Wei Hang. That's fascinating. Andrew, next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On tariff, I think as you know, or for the audience who don't know, semiconductor actually is exempted from the country tariff, the reciprocal tariff, and is still under Section 232 investigation together with medical devices, pharmaceuticals. And the investigation is nearly finalized, and we're still waiting for the US to announce measures. And there have been lots of speculation as to what type of conditions may be applied. But from the Malaysia perspective, I think if it is all relative. If Malaysia is imposed, and at the moment it seems to suggest that it is a one rate, and it is not so much different country has different rate, but it is looking at other conditions, like for example, there's the company looking at even company level tariff. If your company has got facilities or will have facilities in the US, then maybe some of the things that it's exported or imported into the US are exempt. But it is all about relative, and to maintain our competitiveness at the moment, zero. And as a result, the export numbers, as I mentioned, is up because there has been conscious effort by a lot of the semiconductor companies to have a alternative sourcing of components from China to outside of China to prepare for whatever tariff implications that may come. So the exports have gone up, but the investments have gone down. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the industry. Even if I can foresee that even if the measures are announced and are implemented, there may still be a level of uncertainty because companies will say, okay, these are been announced. Will it change in 6 months' time? Will it change in 1 year's time? And because investments, once you announce and once you start, then there is a gestation period. So there's still a period of uncertainty, coupled with the fact that there's a lot of investments, whether real or unreal, that is being going to the US, mainly in terms of AI factories, in terms of wafer fabrication, even to a certain extent, assembly test packaging facilities in the US. So the US has been sucking a lot of investments, and the numbers for 2025 in terms of investment is not as strong as in previous years, I would say. So uncertainty, exports up, investments down. There's still uncertainty lah. And looking at to see from a country to country perspective, if everyone is on 10%, then we're still back on parity. But there's still a lot of uncertainty in the industry.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. Ming?
Yeah. Andrew, I wouldn't use the word real or unreal. I would say real and maybe yet to be realized. Yeah.
Yet to be realized.
But yeah, that's putting on my former politician's hat. Before I go into Ariel's question, just one point I want to make. I think when we talk about critical minerals processing, obviously China has dominance in this area, but I was informed and educated by some of my friends in the EU ecosystem that they also have companies such as Solvay and others who have capabilities with regards to rare earth mining. It's just that they are very secretive about it. But perhaps under this new kind of environment, we can in Malaysia attract more players to come into the ecosystem from China, from the EU, from Japan, and even perhaps from the US, because they're also trying to develop their own capabilities. That will take a bit of time. On the issue of data centers and how to present it to voters, I have two quick responses. I think given the fact that the water shortage issue is becoming more serious, even the government has announced that tier 1 and tier 2 data centers will no longer be allowed since they consume a lot of water. This is where perhaps we can look for interesting innovations to bring in to do, for example, water recycling, to use new technologies to do treatment of desalination into industrial water. And I think if, let's say, these technologies can be deployed, then that will also decrease the pressure on the waters to consumers and also to other industries. And that will ameliorate some of the pressures on this subject. The other thing that's related to this would be, like what I said, the publicity. If, let's say, the publicity out there is one or two stories about some places where water is being disrupted, the counter narrative would be, look, what kind of jobs have we created in Johor, not just from a construction standpoint, but from a services standpoint, from the perspective of skills development, from the perspective of how much investment will lead to better paying jobs in the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. So this is where I think entities such as MIDA, MITI, even the Johor State Government through JCOP and the Johor Talent Development Council can come up with this kind of better social media projections. And I think the irony is that many of the hyperscalers who are building these data centers, they are also in the social media game, but somehow their own social media strategy with regards to the benefits of the data centers are not so apparent. That's the second point. The third area is with regards to the agreement on reciprocal trade that Malaysia signed with the US. And I actually want to draw attention to what Andrew said just now with regards to uncertainty. I think one of the benefits of signing this agreement is that there is greater uncertainty among the semiconductor players in Malaysia. Although not all of it has been removed, we're not going to see perhaps the influx of large FDI into Malaysia just because we've signed this, because there's still Section 232 investigations that are going on. We're not quite sure what the Supreme Court decision on this will be. But it has reduced a lot of uncertainty, and I think people who criticize the ART sometimes forget the stability that it brought, at least in the short term, right? And that will provide a reference point in which the Malaysian government can continue to negotiate with the US to say that if, let's say, since we have this, your Section 232 investigation should not hit Malaysia in the same way as others who have not signed this agreement, right? Okay, then the last point is with regards to China. We actually should use this as an opportunity to say, hey, we signed this agreement with the US. It may lead to certain benefits that Malaysian companies and the Malaysian government can extract from the US. Development of small nuclear modular reactors, for example, in the nuclear technology. We can then say, hey, China, let's cooperate more on critical minerals and say that we're gonna invite you to bring in some of the refining capacity that Wei Hang talked about earlier. This actually opens doors for us to negotiate and capture some of the downstream benefits, from the US and also from China. So I see this as a glass half full proposition rather than something that Malaysia is sort of like disadvantaging itself from. So I actually see it as a good thing, and I'm sure the people at MITI, including whoever the new MITI minister is, would be able to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Kian Ming. I really like the having your cake and eating it mood here for once.
We're learning
Much
from
more
Singapore, Ariel.
optimistic.
We're trying to learn from Singapore. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Qarrem,
Yes,
please.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
of course. So I actually just wanted to add on a little bit to what Wai Hong said about the processing facility from China. Of course, public, yes. Most of the discourse has just been in the public. A lot of this has been speculatory right now. It's sort of early stage negotiation. At least that's the term that was used. I think there is a lot to be said about this facility because China has the technology. And so if you were to work with non-Chinese firms to develop it, it could take a lot of time. But working with China, technology is already there. Now, there is a ban on the export of REE processing technologies from China, but that does include a clause that stipulates without the express approval from the authorities. So that could be that could be settled. It can be managed. So in Southeast Asia, if China does not work with nations in Southeast Asia, it's going to be very difficult for us to continue on that journey. But with China, it'll be much easier. I'm not sure. I can't speculate on whether or not it will be a reality, seeing as the issues between the federal and state levels. Now, it could be with a GLC, but it doesn't mean that it has to be a federal GLC. It could be a state GLC, but we don't know what are the details of that. And right now, it's only speculation until the actual thing happens. Now, on the Linus issue, even right now, you had recently, it came out on the news earlier this month that they had electricity issues in Kalgoorlie. Just FYI, Linus has a plant in Kalgoorlie whereby they produce mixed rare earth carbonates, which then come to Malaysia as part of regulatory sort of compromise between Linus and Malaysian government. And so now they have electricity shortage. Last year they had water shortages, right? There are always resource shortages when it comes to rare earths because one thing people need to understand, it's an extremely water intensive facility and plant. And so last year there was a drought in Kalgoorlie, and because the Linus had a agreement with the state government to supply X amount of water to their facility, so that meant that there was a crowding out of water supply in Kalgoorlie itself. And so these are partly some of the reasons why Linus likes Malaysia so much, is because of the favorable business climate as well as the resources that we have. Now, of course, Linus will have they're looking at renewal of licensing, and this will be very much looked at by foreign investors as it's sort of it's a litmus test for future potential investments in Malaysia. One of the reasons why it's so difficult to confirm a lot of the downstream investors is the operational certainty that Lynas will be there to keep producing oxides, right? And so that needs to be sorted out as well. And I think a lot of people will be looking at March with a keen eye.
Thank you, everyone. I think we have also covered the questions raised in the Q&A section about US export controls and also the investment risk profile. So I think we are close to coming to the end of this session. I hope our audience, you have enjoyed yourself and found this useful. I would like to thank our speakers very, very much and our audience for giving us your time and your patience. I'd like to thank my colleagues for their support for this event. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope to see you next year or soon. Bye-bye.